We have something unusual on our front door at home. We don't go out or on our door often, so we forget it's there. Most people don't notice, would notice it for what it is, but it's a mezuzah. It's a small container that holds the Ten Commandments. Do you know about the mezuzah? Okay. Jews have them as a reminder of God's law. When they go out and they come in, they touch the container. We aren't Jewish, of course. The mezuzah was a gift from Gloria's sister. She thinks we're almost Jewish. As we read through the Old Testament, we see that God's chosen people had a hard time obeying God's commandments. The priests would add rules to help the people remember and obey. But they couldn't follow the rules. How are they going to remember if they just keep adding on more? Before the people entered the land God gave them, Moses reminded them, and he reminds us all. To walk God's way. Deuteronomy 26:17. Let's turn there. It's the only verse I'm going to have you turn to today. It's Deuteronomy 27, verse 17. Today I have proclaimed to you the Lord to be your God, and that you will walk in my ways. Moses proclaimed the priests to read the law of Israel every 7 years. This was to remind them that the law came from God and not from man, and it was to be obeyed so they would be blessed. Over time, God's law was added to. It wasn't just to make the simple laws easier to understand. The additions were to make were made because people were always looking for a way around the law. When Jesus was on earth, there were so many rules that nobody could keep them. They didn't even know what they were. We know we have a lot of rules to cover. We know we have a lot of rules to cover everything our kids can think of. But as adults, we also notice that people around us see how other people worship other gods. And they want to add those practices to their worship. So we have a number of Christian churches adding things from other religions to their faith. The Pharisees continued to add rules, but of course adding rules didn't make it easier for people to follow God. It just gave the Pharisees more power over the people. This wasn't the way God wanted his people to worship him. God wants us to know him and to go to him when we need understanding. It isn't wrong to ask a pastor questions or talk to our brothers and sisters. But we should know that going to God to gain understanding is where we should be at. Our Father wants a personal relationship with each one of us. He's always ready to hear us. He wants us to go to him when we need understanding and for forgiveness when we've done something wrong. He's always ready to hear us and ready to forgive us. So what does a mezuzah on the door have to do with all of this? It's okay to have it. Is it okay to have it on the door? Like many other things, it depends on why you have it there. People make all kinds of things into idols. Sometimes we can do that without even realizing we made a thing an idol. The need to touch a mezuzah and coming out or going in makes it an idol. Having something that reminds us of God's law and his love is not a bad thing. if we aren't putting that thing above God. Do you keep a Bible where you can see it so you won't forget to read it? Do you have reminders of the holy days so you can be ready for them? And we don't make, and we all make sure we have the time for when the time of unleavened bread ends, so we can end our fast. It's not wrong to have reminders. The older you get, the more reminders we need. Sometimes I forget what my reminder was for. I tell myself because I have too many reminders. Not that my memory is getting worse, of course. I tend to forget the mezuzah on the door. I have never thought it was for protection. It's not there to make us look religious or blessed. Some people do use them for that reason, or to show God how pious they are. There isn't anything on earth that some people don't use the wrong way. Some of the things that might be best just stay away from. But of course, we can't stay away from them all. Only one person noticed and remarked about our mezuzah, and he asked if we were Jewish. Of course, I have never asked a Jew if they would be bothered if I had it on the door. Our Father gives us 10 commandments, only 10, but they cover everything. We also have the 10 commandments in a frame hanging on the wall. It reminds me how simple God made the rules for us simple-minded people that He loves. For some people, a mezuzah on the door or the 10 commandments hanging on the wall is a way to look pious without really having to follow or honoring God. Having a Bible in your household can also be a way of looking pious, especially if you don't ever bother to read it. There's a TV show about an Israeli man I watched once, and how they let others know who they followed by the hats that they wore. Some of the hats were larger and more silly than any hat I've ever seen anybody wear. Some were so big that if a wind came up, the hat and the guy might fly away. The hats aren't to show they trusted God. They were a way of showing what human being they followed. This is the one that I trust in, and this is the one that I follow. Not God, this man. Why do so many people put their trust in things that cannot save them? I don't know when Jews got the idea to put a small container with the 10 commandments inside the door to help them remember to obey. I'm pretty sure whoever thought of the mezuzah told people that it would make it easier to obey God. Can you see it? Some guy comes to the door with a bag of things, telling people he has something that reminds you of God's law and teach the kids. You don't even have to worry about being saved. You'll have God's law on your doorposts. It'll remind you and protect you when you turn the kids, when you and the kids go out the door. This is how people get into trouble. We try to take the shortcut. We think God will overlook some things because we have a good excuse. It isn't wrong to have reminders. The first thing we do with a calendar is to mark up the holy days. That's what we do. I don't know what you guys do, but that's what we do with our calendar. The reminders are so we won't forget there's something coming up that we need to be ready for. People who were the first to have the mezuzah on their door may have thought it was there to help them remember the 10 Commandments. Yes, and it was a good thing for them and their children. I don't think most of them looked at it as a way to remember so that they could be pious without having to obey the law. But things like that can get to be a habit. And you always touch the Missoula going out and coming in, you touch it without thinking. Not even think of what you're doing. It just becomes a habit. I never tried to make a habit of touching the Missoula because we know that that would not be a good idea. If you make a habit out of something, you don't have to work at remembering. You don't have to pay much attention to it. It just becomes so automatic you don't think about it. This isn't what God wants us to remember, how God wants us to remember Him. And to remember. This isn't how God wants us to remember Him and His commandments. He wants us to remember His commandments because what? We are His children. And we should be like Him in His family. He wants us to get to the point where we don't even have to remember His commandments, but they're part of us. They're who we are and what we are. We live them. I like the 10 Commandments framed on our wall. I do stop and read it occasionally because I like to think God knew His not so bright children need reminders.